Welcome to the Intrinsically Ordered podcast. Today, Colin and I are joined by Therese, who grew up as a traditional Catholic, discerned to become a sister and eventually deconstructed, and is now outliving her best life in the Midwest. So today's conversation, we'll be hearing more about her story, her thoughts on being queer, being Catholic, and we might even have some witchcraft talked about in this podcast. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Therese. Welcome.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we can just hop right into your journey. I tend to talk to a lot of people who are converts to traditional Catholicism, like myself. Colin was raised in traditional Catholicism, and I'd love to hear, what was it like to be born into that kind of culture?
I mean, I feel like it has its pros and cons. It has a lot of cons, but it's like, you do get raised in sort of like a culture, kind of. Like, it's a different culture than the rest of the world. So there's like things that you do and ways that you celebrate, like the big holidays like Christmas and Easter, that are not how other people celebrate it. So you do have kind of like this culture. And I know that when I was very little, like my mom was like, it was like a very emotional thing. I feel like I got a lot of really good spiritual training in it, like a lot of serious spiritual training, because as I transitioned into witchcraft, I realized a lot of the disciplines of witchcraft, like meditation, focusing, visualization, all those things, I already learned. But like,
Catholicism and witchcraft surprisingly go hand in hand more than they would think.
They really do. They really do. Like, a lot of the stuff that I was learning in witchcraft is just so familiar to me. Like, it's so familiar. Like, the rites, the rituals, like even the way they use like holy water in witchcraft is just exactly how they used holy water in like trad Catholicism. So and like even like little things, like I remember my mom would buy specifically beeswax candles, because of the 3 days of darkness. Those were the only candles that were supposed to be lit. So that's like a witchy thing. Like, my mom was like low-key a witch, like the way that she practiced Catholicism. So that was like, I think, a positive aspect about it. I think the more negative aspects of it were like the way that it made you feel so guilty for things. And the social aspect of it was really bad, because I was also homeschooled. So, like, you know, the social aspect of it, a lot of times, ironically, the moral aspect of it is just really bad. Like, you're gonna have to ask me more questions to voice my thoughts specifically on what was bad. But it's like, there were good things and bad things growing up with it. But I know in the future, it's like, I would like to, you know, if I ever have kids, I'd like to give them a spiritual sort of background, but I wouldn't want to take the stuff that negatively impacted me from being spiritual and give to them, you know. So it's like, everybody tries to do that, I guess.
Before we continue, I just want to say that Therese is part of our growing Discord community of ex-traditional Catholics, or people who still consider themselves Catholic. If you want to join into discussion about her story, actually talk to her and the rest of our growing community, head over to my Patreon for $1 a month to join our growing Discord server. Back to the episode.
So when you say you were homeschooled and you talk about the negatives of the social environment, speaking from my own experience as someone who grew up in the space, there does tend to be sort of an emphasis on bringing a lot of different homeschooling families together, either through the church or adjacent to the church through like a homeschool co-op or anything. Was there something like that in your experience? Was there like an attempt at a social environment for children, or was it really just everyone for themselves?
So I'm sure my parish did stuff like that, but my mom's a hermit. She hates interacting with people, which is ironic because she's a teacher at this point right now. But it's like, she doesn't like talking to other moms, to other adults. And sometimes it's like, and you'll start to learn as you interview me, that a lot of my baggage with Catholicism is baggage with my mom. So I feel like she deliberately stunted my social development, because I was definitely a social butterfly. Like, you could tell ever since I was like 4 years old, I was very much a social butterfly. So I feel like she stunted my social development because it made her uncomfortable. Because then she would have to talk with other people, my friends' moms, because we wanted to do play dates or whatever, and she would have to get out of her boundaries. And sometimes I feel like she stunted my social development because she herself wasn't very social. But
remind me what group you were a part of. Were you FSSP?
So yeah, for most of my life I was FSSP. We were West Coast though. West Coast, Best Coast. We were West Coast FSSP, but when I turned 18, it was an institute parish. But to me, it's kind of all the same. It's kind of all the same to me.
Yeah, you find a lot of overlap in sort of the types of people that will attend both kinds of things. You're not going to get a radically different vibe in terms of the parishioners.
No, because they all want the Latin Mass. That's why they're going. They're not like, there's only so many like dedicated Latin Mass parishes, so it just depends on who you're close to. Like, where I live, the Institute is just the closest one, and where I was growing up, FSSP was just the closest one.
And when you think of your early memories when it comes to religion, and Colin and I have talked about, like, as somebody who joined the traditional movement, I have a lot more positive memories and the overall vibes versus Colin often says that there's more or less, like, all bad. And so do you still hold on to, like, you got to, like, juxtapose this, I have great memories and bad memories, or is for you kind of just, you were never, like, a super zealous young person?
No, I would say I had good memories and bad memories. But it's like looking back at the good memories just feels tainted because it feels like you just know what was really going on. But it's like, I always say, like, woe to the tree who forgets its roots. So I embrace that those were good memories. Like my first Holy Communion was a bunch of really good memories. Like especially as like when I was really little, like I would say pre-confirmation were a lot of really good memories. For being Catholic, there was definitely a lot of bad things in there, but I feel like that was all like a bunch of social things like modesty rules or like, you know, the way the parishioners acted. I feel like the actual spiritual experiences were pretty good, but that was like when I was a kid. And it's like, you know, when you're a kid, you still believe in Santa Claus and stuff like that. So things are just more magical when you're a kid. So I think
I did debate my mom to reveal Santa Claus is fake when I was in kindergarten. So I may have missed out on that.
Colin was born a hater.
A little bit.
And you'd mentioned that you identify as bisexual. How did you know that from an early age, or how was that to grow up in an environment like that?
No, I probably was one of the most sexually repressed kids ever.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I was bisexual till I was maybe, I want to say 15, 16. And it's like, you know, I barely realized I was sexual, you know, period, before then, or even what being sexual meant. Because like I was so sexually repressed that even if I had a dream where there was something sexual happening, I would think to myself in my dream, I shouldn't be thinking about that. That's not right. I shouldn't be thinking about that. In my dream, like subconsciously, that's how deep it went. And I feel like a lot of it was, I didn't want to, like two things. It's like, I didn't want to miss out on communion, and I didn't want to go to confession and confess sins of sexuality, because those are embarrassing. I didn't have perfect or imperfect contrition. I didn't want to tell Father so-and-so about it. Contrition.
Pretty normal thing to not want to tell a middle-aged man as a child about what you're up to sexually.
And
we really removed
because of that reason. I just wasn't up to much because I didn't even want to know what could happen. Like I still to this day I've never seen porn. I've never seen porn. Still to this day I've not because that's how deep that habit is in me. And
yeah, that makes me wonder. Do you find that you struggle with sort of sexual acceptance of yourself still now that you're out of the whole atmosphere?
Maybe subconsciously, but I feel like consciously, no. I feel like consciously I am very, like, I feel, you know, I'm, like, kind of new to it, so I still feel like I'm just learning, and I'm just kind of trying to enjoy the experience, but I don't feel like I'm, like, sobbing when I have sex or anything like that. Like, I love having sex, and I love being sexual, and wearing cute clothes that make me feel sexy, and, like, talking about sex. Like, I love that. Like, I feel like that I'm making up for lost time. Because I feel like I was just always, like, a very open person that way. And it's just, like, I was fighting it all this time. And it just feels like a relief to finally be able to participate in that part of myself.
There's this thing that I know John Paul II talks about a lot as, like, the integrated sexuality or something. I think that's what he said.
Anything John Paul II says about sexuality is bullshit.
Well,
Nope.
yeah. Well, I was going to say, in when he talks about it, he means like being able to be celibate, basically, but like going into an open eye. But I think there is something to be said about the fact that until you're able to accept, embrace, and interface with your own sexuality sort of openly, you aren't going to really be a fully integrated person. And there is like, it's just such an important aspect of yourself. And I think it's something that most people in the church just don't want to acknowledge. So
Absolutely.
I'm happy to you.
You 100%. I do think sexuality is a huge part of who you are. It's a huge part of being human. And the church wants to act like it's not necessary for, like, one of the things they'll say is like, oh, you don't need sex to live. Like, you need food to live. You need sleep to live. But like, no, you do need sex for survival. It's just a group survival. Like, if nobody had sex,
There's also like the emotional and personal intimacy is something you need for survival, whether or not that's sexual or not. But sexuality is an important aspect of that need that we all have. So I don't know. I do kind of reject that framing that the church gives of like, oh, you won't literally die if you don't have sex. It's like, yeah, well,
Some people will, though.
and they don't realize it's sexual repression that's getting to them. It's like they'll do all this other crazy shit, and it's actually if they just they say go touch grass, like go get laid, you'd feel a lot better.
Well, the Catholic Church talks so much about, like, we want to make sure we're not in a sex-obsessed culture, and we want to, like, make sure we're not having sex all the time. And then you realize, like, so much of life, especially as you get older in Catholicism, is everything's about purity, and every homily, just kind of, like, everything alludes to the idea of, like, habitual sin and virtue and purity. And then I found, like, after leaving and then integrating my sexuality, I think about it way less. It controls less of my life. I dedicate less of my time.
Yeah.
And it's way more fun, and it's not like, it's just like you spend so much time trying to not be horny as Catholic versus just have fun and move on.
No, literally, I've actually found that, because it's like, I remember being like tortured, in quotes, by like impure thoughts or all this kind of stuff. And like, they were like some freaky shit I was being tortured by. And then it's like, once it started becoming sexually active and getting involved with that, it's like they just disappeared. I suddenly became super vanilla. All of a sudden, like, I just didn't care, like, because it's like I had an outlet for it, but I just had no outlet for it. So my brain was just trying to find a way to be sexual without being explicitly sexual, like. So yeah.
And so you said kind of around that 15, 16 age is when you start realizing your queer identity. How did that kind of play out as you got older as a Catholic and staying and leaving and all that good jazz?
Oh, yeah. So I would say between the ages of like 15 and 18 were just horrific years for me. I think they're horrific years for everybody. They were terrible years for me. So like I realized I was bisexual because, well, girls are hot, guys are hot. Everybody's hot. I think everybody is beautiful. And it's like I sort of became just more liberal and just kind of like just falling away from Catholicism slowly. Like I was on Tumblr and shit. Like
that explains the witchcraft.
I got into witchcraft way later, but it's like I'm sure that sowed the seeds. So it's like I was just learning things about different perspectives, essentially, like via the internet, because I just had unrestricted internet access. Despite I had restricted access to everything else, like even people. Like I was like super homeschooled during that time. Like I felt like I was locked in my house. Honestly,
Did you come out to anybody?
I came out to my sister, so that was a mistake.
What happened
She outed
there?
me later. So
Wow.
Yeah, I came out to my sister. I came out to a few of my friends. So that's about all who I came out to. And my friends I made via the internet because I couldn't make friends in real life. Because, I don't know, Catholics are just hard to make friends with. I've just found that they're hard to make friends with. Because
Unless you got theology.
Yeah, one of the reasons I found it hard to make friends with Catholics in real life is because I knew what they wanted me to say. I knew how they wanted me to behave. And even when I was still a devout Catholic, I just couldn't. I just couldn't say what they wanted. I just couldn't act how they wanted me to act. I just had to be my authentic self. So I would say shit that would just make them cringe and that they wouldn't like.
I think in especially trad Catholicism spaces, there's just this insane pressure towards social conformity within whatever small social circle there is. It can be really stifling, and I feel like a lot of gay kids, especially that I know, who grew up in that, there's sort of this tendency to either really repress and try to conform, or you just become the weirdest kid in the entire parish.
I was the weirdest.
Game.
I would do, and it's like I feel like I knew I was doing it to push them away, but I also felt like I was justified in doing it because I just didn't want to be friends with them, and I think I felt like I had to be because I had no problems making friends because I had tons of friends that I made online or that I would make when in secular situations. I would make friends easily. It's just that, you'd hear in sermons all the time, you need to make Catholic friends. You need to have people on the journey with you. And I'm like, I got to make some Catholic friends. And it's just, I couldn't. And I just felt like terrible because of it. I thought I was just a jerk or something because I knew part of it was me sabotaging it by saying some weird shit or not thinking. Like, I remember I was at book club once and they're like, oh my God, they're like, this bishop, he's gay. And I just laughed because they were so serious about it. They were like it was a terrible thing. And I was laughing really hard. And I think they stopped trusting.
So how did your kind of like teenage years look? You said that you came out, but then you were outed. But obviously you were still kind of in the religion. What do those next few years look like in terms of you identifying as Christian or as Catholic or as religious?
Yeah. So, like, after I was outed, so my teenage years were tumultuous. I was kind of outed when I was 18, so sort of at the end. So, between that, my sister managed to keep mum for a while, but I think I don't really blame her. I definitely shouldn't have told her, but I don't blame her because she still has kind of really bad scruples, like terrible scruples at the time. So she probably felt like something really bad would happen to her if she didn't tell my mom. So I don't blame her for it at all. But that's what happened. And that happened when I was 18. Before then, I was like going back and forth between super liberal Christian and then going to the other extreme, like I'm a trad cat. And all in between that time, I identified as a lesbian for a while. Part of that was because I just think that, like, when you're a young Catholic woman, you can only date Catholic men. Like, you are told explicitly you cannot date anybody else. It's just a bad idea. And you don't want to be in that situation, which is really funny because my dad was a Catholic. So I was like such a big hypocrite about it. Because my boyfriend isn't Catholic, obviously. And she's just like, he's not Catholic. And I'm like, Dad wasn't Catholic. Marrying him. But okay. But it's like they really want you to, like, only marry Catholic men. That's your only option. And just, I don't know if you ever heard of the book Catholic Courtship in an Oversexed World. Oh, it's a trad classic.
I feel like I've heard of the title.
It's a trad classic. I don't know, because you guys are gay. I don't know if that book was particularly appealing to you to read. But my mom made us read it. And it was terrible. The things in there were just some of the most horrendous things I had ever heard. Just to give you an example of one of the things that they said this was about the way you dress. They said that, if you dress modestly, a guy's going to look at you and say, oh, I really like her. She's going to make a great wife, a great life companion. But if you dress immodestly, whatever they think is immodest, which could be completely nonsense, but if you dress immodestly, a guy's gonna look at you like, oh, I like her, but like only as like, a fling or like a hookup. And I'm like, is that how these people think? Like, is that how young Catholic men think about women?
It's written by a priest, right?
It is, and it was super detailed about the sex. So I don't know why he was writing that if he allegedly shouldn't be having sex.
He just was a student of
Yeah.
ways.
He was a student. It was so weird, and it was like it gave you really specific details about having sex, and it was like very male focused, very much.
Obviously,
men enjoy sex more, women enjoy sex less. Even if you're tired, you should still have sex with your man because that's just the charitable thing to do. And I don't know that. The whole book was just disgusting. It was just a disgusting book. And I think shortly after I read that book, I started identifying as a lesbian.
That makes so much sense, honestly.
I'm looking through the table of content, and it's all just about courtship. It, first of all, it just looks boring on top of being horrible. It just looks, the chapters all look exactly the same. Written by a priest. And the whole courtship thing, that's like my red flag that somebody is so far down the trad rabbit hole and they can't say dating. They have to say courtship. It's just like, yikes. So I can't blame you for not wanting to date Catholic men because that would be insufferable.
Yeah. So I started identifying as a lesbian, and then I slowly kind of reconverted to Catholicism, but I felt more comfortable because I was a lesbian and I didn't have to marry a man. So I felt more comfortable becoming a devout Catholic after identifying as a lesbian because I was relieved I didn't have to marry a Catholic man.
That's so interesting. As someone like who only has like the male perspective, the Catholic stance on being gay was such an issue for me. But it's interesting that it became like a way to avoid the fate of a standard heterosexual woman.
Literally. It was like a relief. I'm like, I don't have to get married to one of these assholes.
That's crazy, but it makes sense.
Yeah, so it's so like, I just became like, I call myself like, lesbian trad, right? So like I was a lesbian, but I was still in the trad Catholicism. I was open about both things. Not to people I knew in real life, but like, in online spaces and stuff like that. I was very open about both of those things. And then my sister did out me. And even though I tried to tell my mom I was following all the rules of the Catholic Church, I was doing everything right, I just happened to be a lesbian. She was like, she just shut me down. She said, you're not a lesbian, and like all kinds of stuff. Like, she told me I just hated my body. Like, that's why I thought I was a lesbian, which is not what I was thinking at all. So it felt like such a weird projection on me.
That's why I hate the like Jason Everett approach of, well, if you just come out as same-sex attracted, like, you'll be fine in the church. And the answer is, like, no. Like, you can apologize preemptively, but you're going to, like, the rate of people who won't accept you, even if you do say, oh, I'm same-sex attracted but celibate, it's, like, through the roof, especially in trad circles. Like, nobody's holding that nuance. So I get it that Jason Everett can apologize, but what do you actually do about life when even your own parents are saying that?
Yeah, it's like, because I honestly, like, I legitimately thought that my mom was going to be, like, proud of me for not going down that path. Like, I thought she was going to be proud of me, but she wasn't. She was livid. Like, she was, like, very, very mad. Like, it was crazy. It was definitely crazy. After that, she went full gulag on the house. We call it the gulag. She does this once she finds out her kids have lives of their own. So she does this every few years where she goes full on gulag. Like, she made everybody show her their playlists. Like, show her the music apps. Show her, like, we weren't allowed to watch anything that was not PG. Like, we weren't, which basically just leaves you watching Kung Fu Panda and Sound of Music.
Not the worst options out there.
No, not the worst options, but, after a while you get sick of it. Once I left the church, I just watched a shit ton of, like, really inappropriate adult cartoons. I love them. Oh, but it's like she went full on gulag. She gets over her gulag because she gets tired of enforcing it for after about 6 months. But it still sucks because she goes crazy and she went on full gulag. Everybody in the house was on gulag, and I'm telling my sister, I'm like, you remember that time when she went full gulag? And I'm like, that's because of me. That's because I thought I was a lesbian at the time. And she's like, what? That's why? That's why?
Have you ever read the book? Have either of you read the book called Educated?
I've heard of it.
It's a memoir of this lady growing up, and her dad. They're in kind of a more conservative LDS sect, and then he becomes very bipolar. And it's kind of this story of her unraveling all of these like crazy things that her dad did in becoming religious were always correlated with episodes. And I don't want to speak too much into your family, but there are parents out there that I feel like religion enables a lot of underlying issues to manifest, but not seek treatment, but to like be reinforced by religion.
I see it in my mom, and I see it in her two sisters, who are still very deeply Catholic. Her other sister and brother have since left the church and they've had their own problems, but they have been able to work through them and have come out like more mature as they got older. But my mom's two sisters have almost gotten worse with age. So it's just crazy because my mom used to be like a very open-minded person, like very like chill, sort of live and let live. Like she was Catholic, but she did tarot readings. She had gay friends. She had she made friends with the only like trans person at her church before But it's like,
Transition at your trad church?
not in my trad church. This was back when, before Ava and I was born. This is like when she was at the Novus Ordo Catholic. So, but then one day, I don't know what happened, but she just got super radicalized. And I was asking my aunt about it, and she said she's not sure exactly what it was. But part of it started when, like, someone, like, because she said that she did tarot readings, and then someone at the church told her you can't be a real Catholic and do that. And I think that started her down the rabbit hole or something like that. It hit some insecurity in her or something. So I don't know what, but at some point she got radicalized before I was born. And then I was born. It was a product of her radicalization because she stopped birth control.
And then, if I remember correctly, you went to TAC for a period of time?
Yeah, 2.5 months.
That really is a short period of time. What's the story there? That must have been an absolute hoot.
So, at TAC, I only went there because it was one of the 3 colleges my mom would let me go to.
What are the other ones? Why do you have to know the list?
Christendom and, what's that one? Wyoming.
Why are not Catholic in Kansas?
No. So she had 3. She had 3. It was like not even the whole Newman list was available to me. It was just those 3 for some reason. The only colleges, and it's like I go to a college I want to go to now. I go to public college. My mom has no qualms about it now, but it's like I would have liked you to let me go to a college I wanted to go to, maybe. So TAC to me seemed the cheapest and the least worse of those 2.
Less bad than Wyoming.
Yeah, so I had to choose between Christendom and Wyoming. Christendom seemed both expensive, and I didn't like that they didn't take government money. That seemed suspicious to me. And Wyoming was just in the middle of buttfuck nowhere.
Always TAC isn't a beautiful place.
It is in a beautiful place. It was, I will say, so I'll start with the positive things about TAC. So TAC was in a gorgeous place. The people there were very nice, almost suspiciously nice. They were very nice there. You could leave your purse on the church steps. Nobody would steal it because nobody's going to hell. So, and the food there was really good. The food there was amazing. Like some of the best, like I think the best college food I've ever had. And I've had a lot of college. So, no, those are the good things about TAC.
Short list.
I did like that they read the classics. That was also appealing to me that they read the classics. But one of my problems is that I have with, I think, trad Catholicism in general. I want to be fair. Trad Catholicism only does this. But it's this weird exclusion of people of color and women from their literature, from what they consider beautiful, from what they consider classics, from what they consider ordered. It's like when I was at TAC and I'm looking at their reading list, they focus so much on Western civilization, Western. You're like, you know how like Nazi that sounds? Like when you keep talking about Western civilization like that, and it's like I look at the books, right? And it's like, first of all, it's a white sausage party. Only 2 of the books were written by women, and those were in like the 20th century. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, and it's just like, there's nothing that represents me at all. Because I am a woman of color. So it just felt like all the time the church was constantly neglecting me. All the time. Like the trad church was always neglecting the person of color perspective, especially a woman of color, especially like a woman of color, like that is like not, because it's like all the time when they talk about like beauty and like the way that they make the Virgin Mary, they always make her this thin, beautiful young white woman, and it's crazy. And it's like, I remember my sister said, because our church got new windows, and one of them was an Our Lady of Guadalupe window. And I remember my sister said, "Oh, I think I'm overthinking this, but why is she at the back of the church?" She says, "I'm probably just overthinking of it, and I'm probably just overthinking this, but I don't know, because she's been taking like college classes, and you know, college tends to lean left, and it's just like she's like, why is the Our Lady of Guadalupe at the very back of the church?" And I'm like, she's like, "It's probably nothing." But I'm thinking, oh, you're onto something.
But it's a very, like, with the focus on Western civilization, especially at, like, Christendom, I remember touring there, where everybody's in suits, all of the decorum and how people interact is all, like, trying to LARP, like, 19th century, like,
so much.
Britain, which then is, like, that's cool, like, people can do a lot of things, but then when there's no representation of people of color, when all other cultures are kind of looked down upon, but, like, we're not like overtly racist, just like, well, they should really be by our ideals of dress and speech and everything else. It's this really subtle racism that then there's no representation, and then we wonder why so much of, especially online young men in the traditional Catholic movement, are just supremely racist and unapologetically so.
Yeah, because it's like they see Catholicism as like, they see Western civilization as like the cradle of Catholicism, right? They see it as something that has birthed Catholicism, and they don't see any value in cultures that are not Western. Like, it's like, even if you just get beyond the Iron Curtain, like, the value starts going down because they're not Catholic, they're Orthodox beyond the Iron Curtain. And it's like, it's insane. It's insane. It's just like, as a woman of color, it's like, I noticed this almost instinctually, like, from a young age. Like, I've just, like, saw how they acted about, like how they viewed whiteness and how they viewed Western civilization as just it's not just the standard, which is like usual white privilege discussion is like, white is the standard. No, for like trad Catholics, white is the gold standard. And like, people of color are more valued the more they try to become white.
And they're always looked at suspiciously in trad parishes. Some have non-white members, but it's always like they show up for the first time and they're always distrusted, and they always have to keep proving how white acting they can be. And it's just like, nobody wants to address the elephant in the room, which is they're getting stared at the whole time. But they're perpetuating the culture of it.
They really are. And, you know, I'm Mexican passing. That's not what I am, but I do pass as Mexican. So I know that sometimes people bring that baggage with them, or whatever stereotypes or biases they have against Mexican people, they kind of bring with them when they talk to me. They won't make Mexican jokes around me, though. They're not that dumb. They will make it's like, one time some guy was making some racist, like, Asian joke or something around me. He didn't know I was Asian. And so I said, why is that? Like,
Ew. That's the best tactic. He's like, please explain why that's funny for me. They never want to.
No. And then you also mentioned that you discerned religious life and becoming a sister. How did that kind of fit into the equation of dropping out of TAC? Was that after TAC that you discerned?
yeah, after TAC, I was kind of always discerning to be a sister for my whole life, because I feel like my mom kind of was pushing me there. Because I think my mom wanted to be a she never did. So I kind of noticed that she, like, definitely pushed her more devout daughters, which are just two. She only has 3 daughters. So, like, me and my other sister, like, she sort of definitely pushes us towards that. I remember one time I was saying, Mom, why don't guys, like, flirt with me? Or, like, why don't they, like, think I'm cute or something? And she's like, you know, sometimes when Jesus has his brides, he puts a veil of protection around them. And it was really because, now that I look back, it's because I was super sexually repressed and I didn't even realize. I was just giving off vibes like, don't talk to me, and I didn't even realize I was giving off those vibes. But it's like, my mom would basically make up this narrative that we were just called to it, like, and she would be kind of pushing us towards that. So that's just something that I feel like my mom was pushing me towards. But it's like, also, like I said, I didn't want to marry a Catholic man, really. So that seemed like an appealing way to go, because then I didn't have to be alone. You know, I didn't have to live my life by myself. Like, I could live with a group of sisters, right? I could have like a little family. And so I started discerning with the Dominicans in Ann Arbor. They were really nice. They were like some of the happiest people I ever met in my life. So good for them. I discerned with the Daughters of St. Paul. I still kind of do like the Daughters of St. Paul. I really liked them. I thought they were very creative. They were like everything that trad Catholicism wasn't. Like, they were just like creative and like big-hearted and big-minded and just happy. Everything trads were not. And I remember one time I mentioned to a priest at a youth event that, like, I was thinking of discerning with them. And, you know, I think you'd think he's a priest, that he'd be happy that I was discerning with some nuns. And he was like, it's weird that you have this traditional background, right? And you're discerning with such liberal nuns. And I was like, I was about to sob. I'm like, what are you? And I'm like, it's just I just got along with them, and I'm like, are we all Catholic here? I don't know. But like, I was really close to joining them. I was like one more retreat away, I think, from joining them. But there were a couple things in the way. I remember talking to one of the sisters, and I said, I had a really great time at that retreat. I felt like I actually got along with Catholics, and I usually have trouble getting along with Catholics. I feel like I really got along with the other girls there. It was really fun. And she's like, I don't think it's that great that you don't get along with Catholics. She's like, you gotta find a Catholic social outlet and make some more Catholic friends. And so I was like, after that, I sobbed again. But like, I did what she said, because I still am kind of a very obedient person, because that was really put into me. Obedience is just a habit of mine.
Well, it's like the virtue they stress the most.
It is. It really is the virtue they stress the most, because it benefits them the most, you know? Mm-hmm. You know, they also stress humility, but obedience is like humility in action. So I really stress obedience a lot. So it's helped me. Obedience has helped me. I've gotten very good grades. Obedience has helped me. I will admit that, but it has not helped me in other ways. So anyway, I was obedient. I found a Catholic book club through my church that I was interested in going to, but never really went to. So I started going. I had a great time, so I kept going. And honestly, they're a big reason why I left. So thank you, sister. And the other reason I didn't full on join is because I didn't want to cut my hair. I'm very proud of my hair.
Valid.
There are some Catholics out there that are great at accelerating other people's journey and leaving the church. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes the people that, I mean, there's some people that are so gifted at not telling you what the actual reality of what you joining looks like. But sometimes you just need somebody who's all the way in, just on fire for their faith, to just let it slip that, like, joining traditional Catholicism or joining a religious order, like, this is what you have to do, and they forget to do the PR part, and you're like, well, thank you for saving me like 2 years worth of my life. Like,
It took me about 2 years of being in this book club to finally fucking leave. I wish it took me longer to leave, shorter to leave. But when I was there, it's like I've told you this before, but it's like they started saying stuff that I couldn't believe. That I was sitting there and I couldn't believe, as someone who, at this time in my life and my faith, it's crazy. Even though I was literally going to discernment retreats, I was literally like, I went to mass 3 times a week. I went to confession once a month. I did prayer every day, the rosary every day. I read through the whole Bible. I did everything, but I didn't really believe that somewhere. It's like I did all the things. I walked all the walk, but I didn't believe it. I didn't even refer to myself as Catholic. I referred to myself as Christian because I knew what Catholics were like and I didn't want to be associated with them.
Did you have a breaking point when you left the church? Was there a particular issue, a particular thing, or was it just kind of you woke up and realized, like,
it was a particular thing. So the book club definitely really pushing me. I went to therapy. I started talking about, like, because there was a point where I was really depressed. There were other things going on in my life. Like, my dad was going through some really bad health issues. And, like, a lot of the stuff was falling on me, I guess, because my mom loves to outsource things she's supposed to do to her more responsible children. So, like, there was a lot of things that were falling on me. I was getting really depressed. So I went to therapy. Like, I finally dropped the gun and just said, I'm going to go to therapy because I can't live like this anymore. So I started going to therapy and started unpacking things. And, part of it was my religion that we began to start unpacking and things that my mom was doing. So, it slowly happened over time. And then for me, the real nail in the coffin was I was going to move out because I couldn't live with my mom anymore. So I was going to move out. My mom obviously was super upset about it because she was going to be losing the money I was giving into the house. That was her biggest reason she was upset about it, was because of the financial reasons of me leaving. So that really hurt me. To hear that, because when I told her I wanted to move out, she's like, the first thing she said to me was, we need the money, which was really hurtful to me to hear that. But anyway, I was still looking for apartments and shit.
because that even solidifies my reason to move out. I was looking for apartments, and I finally found one that I think suited my needs very well. And I was about to sign the lease for it. And the day I signed the lease, Mom's like, "Can you just come up here? We'll say some prayers." You know, and I'm like, "Okay." And it's like, at this point, I was still walking the walk 100%. My mind definitely wasn't still with Catholicism. I don't think it was. I think it was barely holding on by a thread. But, I was planning at this time to use my freedom very responsibly. Like, I was planning on, I live like very close to a Catholic church, like walking distance. I was planning to go there for mass, like as much as I could on weekdays and stuff. And I told her that, and so she says, "We could just say some prayers." And so like I go up there and we say some prayers, and then I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna go now." And she's like, "Wait," she's like, "I want to ask you, is this the right thing you're doing for your soul?" And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, your mother in need asked you to stay another year, but you refused her. I mean, obviously I'll be fine. Jesus will take care of me and everything like that. But, are you sure this is good for you?" And I was like, "Yes, I do still think it's good for me." And I went and I felt really guilty about it, but I still signed my lease. I'm glad I signed my lease. I'm in my apartment right now as we speak. But that was the nail in the coffin. Because I'm like, at the end of the day, this is what you're using all those years of religion for. This is what you're using it for. You're using it to try to manipulate me, to stay with you, to give you more money. That's what this is for. And it tore the whole thing apart. And it's so ironic because I know at some point when I come out to my mom about this, because I know it's bound to happen at some point, because at some point I want to get married, I want to have kids, and I don't want to do it in church. So at some point it's going to come out. But she's going to be like, I feel like she's going to try, because she's done this before, where she's like, "Was it your aunts who told you this? Was it your older brother? Like, who made you this? Like who said this?" And the truth is, it was her. The truth is, it was her. It was her. And at the end of the day, and that's the one thing she can't accept when my other siblings who are open about leaving the church tell her that it was you who made me leave. She refuses to believe that.
Therapy, for anybody who's like on the verge of leaving or thinking about it or trying to like put the pieces back together, like I can't stress how much therapy helps in my own, like those first few months after, like, do I want to leave and then leaving. In a good therapist, they'll never tell you what to believe. Like the therapist, no therapist that you go to, except for a Catholic one, will tell you if you should go to church or what you should believe. Like it's a space for you to be able to reflect on what you need. And I think even just a few years in traditional Catholicism, I missed out on a lot of social developments and how things are supposed to be and what does healthy relationships look like.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what it's like to grow up in that environment without any more. And like therapy is, yeah.
I will stress though, don't look for a therapist advertising themselves as a Catholic therapist. They can be incidentally Catholic, that's totally fine. But if they're advertising themselves as like a Catholic therapist first and foremost, they're not going to be giving you unbiased medical advice. Speaking from
I didn't like. I think I knew I didn't want a Catholic therapist first of all. So I didn't look for one. But also, I just had to go through my insurance covered.
I was lucky and found there's a grant up here there's an organization up here in the mountains that gives for people under 20 anybody 10 free sessions of therapy, and they coordinate with a bunch of therapists who have their reduced rate, and then the organization then pays for that reduced rate. So especially if you're a younger person or you're queer or you're in a marginalized community, like if you can do some Google searching, like you'll find some people that are willing to foot that bill and to help you get therapy, even if you can't afford it out of pocket.
That's really nice. That's really good to hear. I wish they'd make the age a little bit, because I was 23.
Yeah.
When I needed to go to therapy. But I had insurance because I had a job. I was making more money than my mom was at the time. It's like, that's the thing. It's like I was an adult, but I was also a child, like in my mom's house. But I was like a full-grown adult with a job and like a 401k and like it's like I even had my own car and stuff. It's just like I was living in my mom's house and she was still treating me like I was 14 years old. And like,
I think that's part of the church, especially the traditional church's emphasis on like hierarchy as like the method by which everything needs to work. And so like the family becomes like the base unit for society, and in the family there has to be proper authority structure and hierarchy and all that. And I think a lot of traditional parents really lean into that and they never really let it go.
Yeah, especially because none of her children were children anymore. They were all adults. And it's like she refuses to acknowledge that her children are adults. Like her older sons are in their 30s now, and she still treats them like children. Like, I don't get why she thinks she could do that. Yeah, but it's like, it's a lot of the church baggage is tied up with the mom baggage, because my mom was very gung-ho about it my whole life. Like, she was the church in a way. It didn't matter what the church said about something, it mattered what mom said. I remember during the pandemic when the whole vaccine thing came out, I remember she showed us some video, some archbishop, I forget what his name was, but he's out in the sticks in Kazakhstan or something. He's out in the middle.
Schneider.
Yes, him. He's out in the middle of nowhere. And she made me watch this video about, cause like we were at the point where it's like, you know, some of us might have to get a vaccine or we lose our job. And my dad was in that situation. And first of all, my dad is the type of person who, if he gets COVID, he would die. Like, that's how bad my dad's health is. And she just would not let him get a COVID vaccine. She has total control over my dad, which drives me crazy. Cause she doesn't even take that great care of him, like, for his conditions that he has. But it's like, that's something that I struggled with, because it's not, at the end of the day, is not my responsibility, and me taking on that responsibility was making my health get really bad, my mental health. So it's like I have to distance myself from that, but I still feel bad about it anyway. She made us watch this video, like Archbishop Schneider, whatever, talking to us about how basically getting a COVID vaccine was a mortal sin because you're cooperating with abortion. Yeah. And it's like the abortion juice theory, because my mom would even get Starbucks because of the abortion juice theory. It's because Starbucks donates some money to Planned Parenthood or whatever. So if you're buying a caramel frappuccino, you're basically paying for somebody's abortion.
Which should be awesome. I'd probably buy more Starbucks if that was the case. What was life like after leaving? Did it feel like a weight off of the chest and you were living your best life, or did it take you a while to like get your feet back underneath you after experiencing a sense of loss?
So I will say that I feel like I speed ran through the stages of grief, because like at first it was definitely a relief, but it was still like, you're still in that phase where you're like, oh no, this is the devil. He's tricking me. He's telling me all these lies that I'm going to be so relieved and so at peace. And it's all a lie. He's lying to me. Like, that's what I thought at first. And I feel like I was trying very hard to cling on to Christianity. Though like, I threw Catholicism away, but it's like I was trying to cling hard to Christianity. Like, I was still trying to find like a liberal Lutheran church, or try to experience Unitarianism as a Christian. I was like trying so hard to like cling on to Christianity. Even when I started witchcraft, I started practicing Christian witchcraft first, which I very quickly got sick of because it was just Catholicism for people.
Yep.
Like, I was reading the Discovering Christian Witchcraft books, and they're talking about Mary Magdalene, and I'm like, I know that. Girl, up with her. They just talk to me like she's new. You guys are crazy. Like, I had all that brouhaha Italian magic stuff growing up. You know, you put, if you want to sell your house, you take a little statue of St. Joseph, you bury him upside down in your yard, and your house is sold. Yeah. I knew all of that Italian brujitas stuff, all that stuff. So it was boring to me, like, discovering Christian witchcraft. I had discovered it, apparently. So I started getting into paganism and actual witchcraft, and just started mixing it with Christianity, like Christo-pagan, kind of mixing it. And then I think at some point I did let Christianity go, finally, like, slowly. But in the meantime, while I was doing that, I definitely started living my best life. It took me like a month to get over myself, to get over like the loss. I do still kind of feel like a sense of like cultural loss, because I remember when I was growing up, if I ever had kids, I'm like, oh, I'd be so happy when they have their first communion. You know, we get to celebrate that with them, and you know, celebrating Advent and all like the special Catholic parts of the holidays. And it felt like holidays like Christmas and Easter just had so much more meaning to them when you're Catholic. And when you're not Catholic anymore, they're just, I guess, get together with your family, have something to eat. So like,
Yeah, I'm trying to look for a coven right now because I do really miss that part of religion, of having like, you know, a wheel of the year type of thing is what we call it in paganism. It's like where you connect with it's like I get people who practice hedge witchcraftery, but I don't know if it's for me because I really want to connect with other people. Like that's a huge part of my personality. And that is something I miss about organized religion, is the fact that it had strong community to it. So there are still things that I feel, and there's like that loss of, I feel like there's this great big story that you're part of when you're Catholic. You're part of this beautiful story of like redemption and, you know, the return of the king. You know, you're part of this huge, like, really beautiful story about how there's hope in the dark world and all this kind of stuff. And when you realize Catholicism's all made up bullshit, it's like you lose the big myth, like the big story. Like you're like, well, what's the story now? Like, wait, like, because like the prodigal son is such a beautiful story, and that's like central to the Christian myth, and it's just like, where is that now? It's like, that's one thing that you lose, I think, but I feel like I've gained so much more overall. Like I feel like in the meantime, like I just like speed ran through the stage of grief and I just started living my life because I'm making up for lost time, honestly, because it's like I started dating. I have a boyfriend now. I love him. We have a great time together. I started, you know, exploring my spirituality, making new friends, and it's just so much easier to make new friends when you don't have to worry about whether you're accessory to their sin or not. Yeah. My friend will be like, I'm gonna go do an edible and bye, and I'm like, okay, have fun. And it's like, and I've just been like, you know, exploring my hobbies and like taking advantage of the fact that I don't have to worry anymore about guilt and, you know, whatever. I could just live my life, and that's what I've been doing. I'm just living my life. And I honestly think part of witchcraft and neo-paganism is the idea that to live is to worship, and that to live a pleasurable life is to live a life in accordance with the goddess or whatever they call it. So I've been just, you know, living and worshiping and just having a really wonderful time since I've left. It's been amazing, and I couldn't believe how amazing it was.
Yeah, it's really awesome to hear that, actually. I'm glad. I'm happy for you. And I will say about the myth, the story of like the prodigal son and all those beautiful things that you find in religion, they're not gone. Like those are still stories that are meaningful to all of us, and they're all still people trying to make sense of how they all fit into the world. And just because we don't accept maybe the whole grand meta narrative doesn't mean that we can't find those myths beautiful and applicable to ourselves in some way, you know? Like look at the myths of like Odin hanging himself on the world tree to discover runes or whatever. You know, like I don't necessarily sit here and think, oh yes, that happened, and it's very important that we recognize that real fact for our, you know, finance systems to be run ethically or whatever, like Catholics do. But I don't know. I think there's use in these myths, even if we don't think of them as like this is the truth with a capital T. I think they still say something true about the human condition and how we relate to the world and to each other, and I still think it's beautiful to find meaning and purpose out of those. I don't think we have to.
True. But like what you said, the meta narrative, like, because one of the ways that like I'm a huge like literature nerd. I honestly think reading books saved me too, because I actually was broadly read, unlike some of the people in the book club who I guess were well read, but they were well read in like weird Catholic shit, and I was just like, I feel like I broadly read. Like, I read from all different perspectives. So, hearing some of the things I said was crazy. But I felt like part of the way that I interpreted literature was, like, through this Catholic meta-narrative. And it's like, now, it's like I felt like that the meta-narrative that Catholicism had was just, it was like a way that they controlled your thought, but it also was a way that made other things make sense. Like when you think of the myths, like even like the Odin hanging on the tree, like, oh, that's a prefigure of Christ, right? That's how we would see it in the Catholic meta-narrative. So it's like, you know, yeah, you have all these myths now, and then it's like, I have all these myths, I have all these things, and it's like, but what am I connecting them to? Is the thing. Is like, that's part of the loss that you have. Is like, what am I connecting it to? What's the big story?
I think
here?
It's something we all have to build for ourselves, though. I think we all have our own version of myth making that we need to do in our lives, whether that looks like neo-paganism or looks like looking at all these old myths and pulling the ones that matter to us, or if it just means looking at like the natural world and seeing how you fit into that and sort of making a narrative for yourself out of that. I think everyone at some point has to do that. And I think with Catholicism, you just outsource it to someone to that deep. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a new skill to learn. The myth building is like a very new skill to learn because Catholicism did so much for you. Like they did so much for you, like with your mind, they thought for you.
Exactly.
And I found a lot of things. I found it easier to think for myself because I've been doing that. I feel like I've been doing it the whole time. But creating a myth for myself is something completely different. Because I love to write, but after I left the church, I struggled to write because I felt like I no longer had I didn't have any morality to prove or any, lesson to teach or any, meta-narrative to link to. So, it felt like my writing, when I started to write, was, disconnected. So it's I've been trying to write, but it's just not been the same. So it's I'm trying to look for that again, that inspiration. I've been doing a lot of exercise though. So that's good. I've been riding my bike a lot. So that's good. I did not as, it's so crazy. When I was in Catholicism, I did not exercise it much.
What advice, if somebody's listening, and this is what I tend to think of, there's a lot of people who will listen all the way through this podcast, which will I generally think those are the types of people that are Catholic, but really in the back of their head, they're should I be out of this thing? And so if you were talking to somebody who's now heard your story, heard you leaving the church, and they were on the edge, thinking about leaving, what advice would you give to your past self when you first started really doubting the church and if you should leave or not?
It's not the devil whispering to you. They're the devil. It's not the devil whispering to you. They literally created the idea of the devil whispering to you to stop you from finding peace. That's what I would tell my younger self. Is because they say, oh, you'll feel so much peace when you leave, but that's all fake. No, it's real. Trust your own intuition and trust your feeling, because they will tell you. I sat through a sermon after I left because I still had to go to church because but I was there and the sermon said, not to trust your passions, and the passion you were most not to trust was joy. Fuck that. Follow your joy. That's what I say.
Amen.
Life's too short to flog yourself all the way to your deathbed. Well, it's been great getting to hear your story, and I am so glad to hear that that therapy was helpful and that you found your way out, and it sounds like you're living your best life, and imparted some good advice for people listening. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and anything else that we want to talk about?
No, thank you guys so much for having me. I've always wanted to be interviewed on a podcast.
One more thing to check off your list.
Yeah, thank you so much for interviewing me. It's really been awesome. You guys are awesome. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on.